Hello and welcome to Moving Through Menopause. And here I am today with the collective, the Menopause Collective, a wonderful group of women. Women are so collaborative anyway. And so I thought, why not? Let's get a group of gals together. And we're not all here today, but, you know, there will be times when there are different people represented. So I'd like to, obviously you can see the names on the scores on the doors, the names on the windows. And so today we are talking all about pain, and particularly joint aches and pains, muscle aches and pains, and how menopause is definitely a contributory factor to our experiences of sensation. And there's lots of different reasons why this is happening to us. And so today we're going to tackle this topic from lots of different angles. And so I'd like to first of all welcome everybody. Give us a wave. There you go. And so, the first thing to remember about menopause is that, it's all about hormones and the lack thereof, and the systemic effect that this have. And so everything is, is connected. There's definitely no doubt about that. The way in which the hormones influence our brains, our hearts, our muscle tissue, our bone tissue. This is a systemic effect that's occurring. And so this definitely has a contribution to make to our experience of painful symptoms. And so I'm going to call and have a chat with June Tranmer, first of all. June is an acupuncturist, and so schooled in the Eastern approaches, if I'm not wrong, June.
Yeah, and really, I mean, it is worth remembering that different cultures have very different experiences of menopause because of their outlook and because of their diet and their lifestyles and their attitude. The menopause is one of the many gateways of life. I also work with children, and there are several gateways in that phase. But um, menopause, along with puberty, is one of the main gateways for women, along with having children, if they choose to do so. So it's about going with the flow, always about actually stepping through that door and not being anxious about it, being ready to embrace the next phase of life. Um, Unfortunately, in the past, a lot of Oriental people and people in this country as well didn't really live much beyond that age. Back in the day, it's kind of a very recent hundreds of years, though. I mean, recent in the whole millennia of everything. Recent that we did come up against this living much longer. So it's a mixed blessing. So it's all about keeping the circulation flowing, keeping the body fluids flowing, keeping the energy flowing, the emotions, the digestion, and our thoughts. And if all of those are continually being nurtured and continually flowing properly, we should not get pain. So our method is to restore that balance. And you speak to any acupuncturist or kinesiologist or Chinese medicine practitioner, they talk about natural ways of managing these things. And we did talk previously about cupping. You can get these tiny cups and you can do that yourself, but be careful not to bruise yourself. Very important. It's not necessary to do bruising for cupping. I know all these Olympic swimmers spend so much time bruising themselves with cupping. It isn't necessary. So yeah, managing the emotions without repression, um, and making sure that you stop eating when you're 7/10 full. Have a yeah, have a hearty breakfast. This is a Chinese saying that matches the British saying: hearty breakfast, a moderate lunch, and a small supper, or breakfast like a king, lunch like a nobleman, and supper like a pauper. Yeah, that's the eat when calm, when sitting down and chewing well, and that might lead on to Shirley and more interesting kind of detailed food advice.
Yeah.
I think that's a lovely thought, June. And you were going along the lines of mindful eating, which I recommend a lot to my clients, and it's great from a digestive point of view. But yes, thank you for the intro. But yes, I'm not going to really go down that route because I think we want to focus on joint pain, and I think I was going to speak a little bit more about inflammation, which is, linked a lot with pain, especially with joint pain. And I think, as Phillipa said, especially around the menopause, it's one of those symptoms that many can experience, unfortunately. So I would say from a nutrition point of view, it's looking at your overall sort of diet and lifestyle as to you as an individual. You're very unique, and with your genetic history as well. We're all very unique. And so thinking, well, actually, what areas can I look at to take back a bit of control here? So if we look down, some evidence-based recommendations, which is the way I've been trained and I work. So some foods are evidenced to be quite pro-inflammatory for people. So being aware of that and keeping those foods low. If you're experiencing joint pain, aches, inflammation, really great start is to keep those evidence foods low in your diet, such as too much dairy. So we're talking about obviously cows and goats products here. Too much red meat, too much alcohol, too much coffee. Too many, sorry, everybody who's listening here, too many sugary foods and drinks. They're all quite evidenced to promote internal inflammation. Now, let's not forget, inflammation is a good part of the healing process. If we injure ourselves, we need that inflammatory process to encapsulate that injury so the immune system can heal it properly. But the problem is when inflammation gets out of control, it can lead to a whole host of chronic conditions and autoimmune conditions, such as rheumatoid arthritis. I think that's something that Phillipa mentioned earlier. So it's just being aware of that. So keeping those kind of foods low, but looking at evidenced foods for natural anti-inflammatory properties, such as your essential fats. So your omega-3, omega-6, but understanding the ratio that we should really be taking in from an essential fats point of view. Recent research shows that really the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 should be as low, omega-6 should be as low as sort of 1 to 4. So it's interesting. And in a lot of people's diets, the ratio is the other way around, 4 to 1. And too much omega-6 in the diet is evidence to be pro-inflammatory. So keeping omega-6 sources lower in your diet, such as sunflower oils, vegetable oils, and keeping keeping sources of good omega-3 fats in your diet, which are higher in omega-3. I mean, flaxseed is a great thing to incorporate in your diet, ground flaxseed into porridge, cereals, etc. That's a really good balance of 6 to 3. Nuts and seeds. So the nuts and seeds, you might be thinking, well, actually sunflower seeds, but actually it's a whole sunflower seed, and that balances out the omega ratio, if that makes sense.
Can I just say, I didn't know that actually, and I did know about the 6-3 balance, and that's the biggest culprit, as is invariably the case, is processed foods, and
absolutely processed foods,
the so-called healthy vegetable oils that they incorporate into these things. So. And this is a relatively new one for me, the 6-3 ratio. So you're quite right that I'm glad to hear you say that the whole sunflower seed, because I love sunflower seed. I'm glad you say that's still on the menu. Hurrah!
Good. And of course, you've got the good protein and fiber in the sunflower seeds as well, which are all going to help to keep your blood sugars balanced. So, sugary foods, sugary drinks, they're all evidenced at promoting that internal inflammation. So, which can cause the immune system to go a bit awry. It can't work properly. That inflammation is staying there, and it's fueling further inflammation. Looking at weight management as well, really important, because excess fat again is evidence to fuel inflammation. So looking at weight management strategies, foods that can balance your blood sugar levels, so you're not storing too much of that energy as fat. So fiber-rich foods and protein-rich foods rather than your sugary foods and drinks. So your brown rice, wholemeal pasta, rye bread, oat cakes, rather than biscuits and processed white bread and pasta, for example.
Well, thank you. That's a whistle-stop tour. Yes, Jude?
Can I just ask you, water?
Yeah,
I didn't mention water, but I yes. I think
and from me as well. I mean, water to flush through all the debris of that inflammatory process. Absolutely important, June. Thank you.
Yeah, and we do know that hydration is something that we need to keep on top of for lots of reasons. We've covered in other conversations. So for me, the pain experience is something that people struggle with. And I have a lot of experience of dealing with the idea that a pain, it is a negative experience. It's not that although having said that, I was out strolling with my son today, and I said to him, there's really not a day goes by when I don't have pain. I said, but that's because I'm exercising all the time.
At least you can identify the cause, though.
Yeah, so I have a slightly skewed view of muscle pain, particularly, in that I almost quite enjoy it. But there we go. That may just be me. And definitely pain is a warning. That's what it's intended to do. It's intended to send us a message that makes us reticent to repeat an experience. Touch something hot, and you're immediately reminded that you really oughtn't to do that again. So, but for the most part, the changes that we're talking about with menopause can be changes that are not necessarily associated with tissue damage. And so, however, our propensity is, by the same token, to avoid this sensation. And so, if we're not very careful, we can end up in a downward spiral of decreasing our levels of activity, which ultimately then decreases the resilience of tissues. And so those tissues then are actually more vulnerable to injury. And so this can become a cycle. Yes.
And it blocks the flow. If you stop moving, your flow doesn't happen.
Well, I was just going to say, and that can move people down the medication route, and that's a whole other, topic of conversation from an inflammatory point of view with non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, for example. But I'll stop that.
This is true, and
we can talk about that another time.
I definitely favour natural approaches, and like I said, something to rub on or something to. To eat or sniff even with the essential oils. And so, but still we have this piece in the mind management around, how do we approach that sensation of pain with curiosity, maybe, rather than the fear that stops us from moving. And so, Jackie, I wanted to bring you in at this point to with your hypnotherapy approaches. Is this something that you experience dealing with?
Yeah, and actually what you just said there was spot on in terms of approaching it with curiosity, because actually it is there to tell us something. And what we don't want is to develop a fear against pain. So we can question it. We can ask ourselves, why am I experiencing this? If there isn't, something that we can say, actually, I've had a knock to the hand and that's why I'm experiencing pain. We can take pain in all sorts, whether it's headaches, tension, shoulders, back, muscular. And a lot of that can come on through thoughts. It can come on through being anxious or through being depressed or just feeling generally out of control. But we can also have secondary gains from pain as well. So if we're fearing social situations, if our self-esteem isn't feeling so good and we want to try and pull away, then actually we can use pain there unintentionally, but for what our mind is perceiving as a positive benefit to hold us back from social occasions, but actually that in itself is shrinking life. It's robbing us of doing things. It's the whole circle of that is negative. But this is where we can start to ask ourselves exactly why we are experiencing the pain, and just absorb it and look at it in that nature of being curious as opposed to being fearful of it. What is it actually trying to tell us? Because, a lot of the time we're just not aware of what we're really feeling. We just have this pain and we instinctively pull away from whatever it is that's causing us the pain. So there's lots of things that we can do to help to overcome that. I mean, it may be that actually there is a physical pain there, and we can use various techniques, and actually the mind is incredibly adept with pain, but we use it in a way to magnify it as opposed to shrink it. Now, we all know that if we are feeling a pain, we can imagine scaling it up, and we can imagine building it and creating that feeling of pain and having it become more intense. Because we're able to do that, we're also able to do the opposite, but we just don't ever think to do that. So it's almost imagining having an internal dial within the mind, and let's say our pain scale is somewhere about 6 or a 7, we can imagine turning that up and feeling it as a 10 and feeling it much more intense. But we can also imagine taking it down, and it might be that we only need to turn it down to somewhere maybe about a 5 or a 4, because as you pointed out as well, we don't want to take pain away because it is actually there to tell us something. But if we can just turn it down a couple of notches, it can take us into a place where we feel much more in control. And when we feel in control of that pain, that's where we actually start to take away the fear. And it's the fear of the pain that stops us doing things. But if we feel that it's somewhere that's manageable, so as in yourself, Phillipa, you've just said, with your exercise, you just keep doing it and you're in complete control of that pain. It's not a problem. You're just exercising and enjoying the exercise, and the pain is that's somewhere in the back of the mind. And that's because you feel in control. And if we can take that notch of the pain and just turn it down a little bit, then we put ourselves in control, and we're then able to move forward with life.
Well, I do like that, and that's definitely something that's the mindful movement practices that I employ give you that opportunity to be curious, to explore. And actually, oftentimes we get to the end of moving and it feels better. And if only we can get over that initial hurdle of being fearful or worried about a particular experience. And so, the benefits of moving, increasing the circulation overall, and then the chemical effects on the brain that we get, the feel-good factor, distraction even sometimes. So
lifestyle plays a huge impact onto it, because generally pain is experienced and is more heightened when we are feeling more anxious or more depressed or low. So the better the flow, our balance of life, the better everything is, then the easier pain can be for us to manage when life is in a much more balanced place. So
I mean, that's it. And of course, you mentioned stress as a contributor. to a lot. I mean, a lot of what goes up wrong can be attributed in some degree to stressful life experiences and anxiety also, of course. And this is undoubtedly a feature of menopause, and definitely something that heightens those painful experiences. And so I wanted to bring Nikki in at this point. Nikki is a health coach, but also an ultra athlete. And so if anybody knows about pain, it's Nikki. How many miles do you run, Nikki? I can't remember.
It depends from week to week, to be honest with you. I have just completed a 53-mile ultra run, so that was quite a big one, and I can totally relate to everything we're talking about here in terms of sort of recognizing kind of good pain and bad pain. So, you know, as a runner, there are times when you know, I will experience pain that is bad pain because there is a problem. There are other times when I'll be experiencing something that's just, you know, it's just my body may be saying, okay, we're doing quite a lot at the moment, but it's not necessarily an injury or an issue or something like that. But I've certainly noticed, you know, as now an older runner, you know, I've been running for the last 10, 12 years. And, you know, with the increase in age, there is definitely, you know, a greater recurrence of injury and, you know, greater recurrence of pain than there was previously. So, you know, it's definitely something that I can relate to. Just to pick up on the stress element that you mentioned there, you know, that is a big thing really that we need to manage, and particularly if we're feeling pain, we can become more anxious and more stressed about it. And of course, you know, stress is responsible for releasing is the word I'm looking for, greater levels of the stress hormone cortisol in the body, which in itself is inflammatory. So, you know, if we could become more stressed, cortisol itself is an inflammatory risk on the body. And that potentially increases the issues around, you know, muscle aches and joint aches and pains. So managing stress, managing anxiety, and managing those, you know, those issues around your mind, particularly important from that perspective.
No, I mean, this is it, and I suppose what we've talked about today is lots of different approaches to managing the same problem, and this is entirely appropriate if we think that there is no one solution that fits all, and what I favour is this integrated approach. But sometimes, you know, we talk about food, we talk about the mind, we talk about movement, and people are so overwhelmed with where on earth do I begin, and so I know that in your coaching work, this is something that you help people to guide people through that process of embedding change into our lives, because it's all very well knowing the theory, isn't it?
And that's absolutely right. So, you know, there is a lot more knowledge and information out there, and people can go and search it out for themselves on the internet and believe they know what to do. But, you know, when I work with clients, a lot of them know what to do. It's just actually, how can they do it? How can they put it into practice? You know, and it revolves around a number of different key areas, really. You know, there's been a great deal of information shared already this morning around exercise, around the mind, around food choices, diet choices, those kind of things. It's actually recognizing that they need to be embedded as habits and regular part of your lifestyle moving forward. You know, particularly at this stage of life, we do need to actively change some of the things that we've been doing previously. And, you know, those things aren't easy to do. So from a coaching perspective, it's about helping people to recognize how they can embed those habits in their life, whether it's doing things at a certain time of the day, or, you know, not buying things that they previously did and buying something else, reducing their choice, their chances of faltering, that kind of thing. So embedding healthy habits is definitely one. Another thing is really recognizing kind of your why and your goals. So, if your why is that you want to, live your happiest, healthiest life, to be mobile and flexible for as long as you can, into and beyond midlife, using that as your kind of your lever, your target to encourage you to embed those habits in your life, is the kind of the critical way forward, really. And if you need that level of accountability or that level of support, don't try and deal with it all yourself. Reach out for some support. It could be a friend, it could be a relative, it could be a partner, or it could be a practitioner, an expert practitioner. But however you do it, use that kind of support and accountability to get you going. And then once that then becomes habit and a natural part of your life, you'll be able to take it from there.
Yeah, and I mean that's good advice. The only thing I would say to that is I think it's important to share your goals with your family members. I think you said that before. I'm not sure about asking advice. There's so much misunderstanding around actually, and I think trusted sources is where I would suggest that you go. And the internet can equally confound us and confuse us, because we have to know that research studies are funded. The funding comes from somewhere. So the fact that red wine is so good for us may just be in the interests of the red wine industry. And so, we have to get a little bit discerning when it comes to these sources of information. And so I would advocate professional sources, and if you've got a friend who's a professional, then by all means bend their ear. But I do come across lots of people who have been misinformed by the best intentioned
and
family. So I throw that out there.
I would agree with that 100%. And I think, that is a lot of the challenge that we find, is that because the internet is so accessible and people believe that it is the font of all knowledge, it's the first place that people often turn to. And sometimes it can do more harm than good. And, the reason why, we become experts and we do all our research and we, all that kind of stuff is so that we have the right level of information that we can guide people in the right direction.
Yeah, that's it. Well,
yeah,
it's so
I would also say that it's worth people being reminded they should trust their own bodies, and if something doesn't feel right, it's probably wrong. It's not worth forcing yourself to do something just because somebody else said it was a good idea.
No,
very important.
I don't disagree with that. I think by the same token, we have to approach our boundaries. It's a little bit like what Jacquie was saying. Navigate your boundaries, because without approaching them, exploring them, then there's a big chance that those boundaries are actually going to shrink. So muscles that don't get stretched get shorter. Joints that don't get moved get tighter. If I put you in a plaster cast and there was nothing wrong with you, when I took the cast off after 6 weeks, you would be in pain. And that is only because those tissues have got used to not being moved, and as soon as you move them, they hurt you. So, this is the real conflict around listening to your body. We can kind of listen too much, and we can ignore it too much. So balance, somewhere in the middle, perhaps.
Balance, always.
Indeed.
That's where we have to learn to overcome that fear of the pain. And as I said, if you can dial it down to somewhere that it feels where you're in control, then that's when you don't have that hurdle of it stopping life. What I would also want to add as well is the words that we use with pain as well. If we think about burning pains, we are actually helping our mind to conjure up exactly that very thing. So we have to be conscious of whether we are escalating it in our own minds, just through our choice of how we describe it, and whether we can describe it differently, in fact, we can use much more cooling words to help to take away those very same feelings of pain. So in the same degree that we can all imagine, if you cut a lemon open and bit into it, instantly you can get your mouth and the saliva and everything going. It's exactly the same with pain. So yes, using appropriate language with it as well can help to downscale it, downregulate it a little bit also.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And this is very sophisticated stuff, actually. And it's not the kind of thing that a lot of practitioners are schooled in. And so go to see an orthopedic surgeon, and because they understand everything in such great detail, the story that they transmit to you may be one that actually fills you with complete and utter panic and dread. And that is entirely unintentional, and I bear that, as a physiotherapist. We sometimes, in dumbing down our explanations of physiology or anatomy, we can generate scenarios, fictional scenarios that are actually a little bit scary for people. And so, this language piece is absolutely important, and at the same time very challenging also, because I was listening to the radio. Vanilla. If you think of vanilla in this culture, we think of something like pudding, yes, dessert. But in some other cultures, vanilla is used in savoury foods, and so they would conjure up that perception of a savoury expectation, if you like. And so that really demonstrates this ability of our programming to influence, whether or not we salivate, for instance.
We can do that just through imagination. So it's that very same imagination that has the ability to either enhance pain or to bring it down a little bit.
And the other thing that people often do when they have a painful sensation is avoid touching it. And so actually skin sensory receptors will begin to be curious. Why am I not getting any messages? Why? And so I know I need to become more sensitive so that I can hear those messages. So then something that was sore becomes more sore because actually we're avoiding even touching it. And so, the first piece of advice I give to lots of people is give it a rub.
Me too.
And
that also falls into the pain gate theory, doesn't it? Yes, because when we're rubbing something, we're actually stimulating those larger fibers to help to close off those pain signals. So
that's right. The pain gate. Absolutely. So I think a lot of these rubs on the market are getting the benefit of the fact
that a rub.
It's not the thing, it's the actual action, isn't it? And with the wrists, you want to do the meridians, you want to do the stroking all the way down the inside of the arm and up the outside of the arm. That's something people can do very easily. Just rubbing over the area back and forth like that. That stimulates the flow of the energy, but as long as you make sure you go the right direction afterwards. Sorry, I'm
this is
down the inside and up the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
So we didn't actually go on to the question bit yet, but we did have a question already about wrists, which is why June is giving us some top tips for how to deal with wrist pain. And I think this is specifically an issue that lots of women especially struggle with, the ability to bear load through the wrist, to get into the push-up position. One of my personal favorites. But yes, just even taking weight through the wrist can be a challenge for lots of people. And yet we know that by bearing load through bones and muscle structures, we will generate strengthening tissue growth or cell turnover. And so this is very something that we really do want to encourage. And so if painful wrists are getting in the way, this can be a problem. Oftentimes it's really about the extensibility of the tissue, so that if you use it, don't use it, you lose it. That's a well-known saying that I can hardly remember. Is it use it or lose it? I think that's it.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's the one.
So it's just performing regular wrist stretches, and I think we do kind of tend to neglect the periphery, don't we? The fingers and toes, we sort of take them for granted and neglect to give them any attention, especially feet, because they're in our socks and shoes all the time. Yes, I know, Jude. So, but anyway, we're talking about wrists. So some simple stretches and strengthening those structures around the wrists as well, using resisted exercises. I favour a rubber band, as Shirley will know. And what you can't do with a rubber band really pretty much isn't worth it. Well, okay, I'll preface that. What exercise you can't do with a rubber band pretty much isn't worth doing. And then this idea of releasing tissues, creating a relaxation in tissues. And that technique that you were talking about then, June, just stimulating the skin, the skin of the arm, is going to, like Jackie said, speak to the central nervous system and generate an effect in the tissues.
It's the meridians.
I know. Well,
It's always the meridians.
I am an acupuncture trained physio. I am on board with this suggestion. And what we find increasingly is that although Western medicine is adamant that there isn't enough research, what we find when we do research increasingly nowadays, we're just proving the stuff that these traditional ancient wisdoms have kind of known all along. All the breath work that everybody's really making a lot of money out of at the moment. Yeah. And those Buddhist monks have been doing it for centuries. So there, it's really only a matter of time. We know that there is a lot of correlation between fascia and meridians. And so movement that speaks to fascia speaks to meridians, and vice versa. A lot of yoga movements give you an opportunity to explore the myofascial connections and these energy pathways, if you want to broaden it out and include the yogic concept of energy pathways. So, for me, it's really about getting curious, getting knowledge, and exploring those boundaries that we talked about, and don't kind of get stuck in a rut, because it may be that there is something that you just haven't tried yet, and if only you could open yourself up to something new. I mean, this is what we talk about, menopause. It's the beginning. It's not an ending. It's a beginning, and we want to explore this season of our lives with vigor, renewed vigor, with enthusiasm, with energy. And there are so many things that we can do that will take us on that journey. And it won't be the same for everybody. Different things speak to different people, and that's entirely appropriate. But I think I've been on my soapbox for long enough. And it just remains for me to thank everybody for joining us today, and to thank the whole panel. Thank you to the collective. I loved having you in my life. And so we'll sign off and say, see you again soon. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Take care now. Bye all.
Bye. Bye.